So mostly what I've been showing you in iBooks Author so far has been in the landscape orientation. But there's also a portrait orientation, and the two can be quite different in a number of ways. So I want to show you both and highlight the differences between them. So first I'm going to click on a slightly longer chapter so that we can see more of it at once by zooming out. And so this is, kind of the general gist of what it's going to look like in landscape. And this is the general gist of what it's going to look like in portrait. So far so good, right? I mean, there's not that many differences. If we zoom in again, aside from the number of columns, they're pretty similar. If we go back to that introduction though, where did our video go? So this is maybe one of the most dramatic differences. There's a video here in landscape, but it's not here in portrait. Now why is that so? The reason, if we click on the video, if we select it, and go to the inspector and click on the wrap inspector, and we look at our object placement, we see that inline is grayed out. We can only choose to have it floating or anchored. And unfortunately, that's just a feature of iBooks Author, is that only inline objects appear in portrait orientation. I'm going to say that again. Only inline objects appear in portrait. And I will demonstrate it by adding another object that we can make inline. And so it's floating now, not visible. We go back, make it anchored, still not visible. We go back to landscape, make it inline now, back to portrait, and now it's visible for the first time. So only inline objects are visible in portrait. That's right there is a major difference. Another difference is this concept of the fold, this line that we can adjust that separates things like the chapter or section title from the text. And up here, if we're in landscape view while we're designing, we can add stuff up there. But if we try to drag it across the line, it just disappears. It just completely disappears. And even if we think that we're trying to click our mouse and be selected down in the text, you can't add it. Anything you add is going to be above the fold and just won't go down there, won't make it down there. And if we go back to landscape, those things just don't appear here at all. So they don't appear with the chapter title, and since obviously they weren't kind of in relation to the text, they don't appear there. So there's these weird asymmetries between landscape and portrait. And it can become quite frustrating to the designer to work all that out. And basically I would say that the more media rich your book is, the more stuff you've thrown in it, the more boxes and videos and interactive widgets and things like that, the less that portrait will resemble landscape. However, to the extent that you can design landscape and can make it look how you want it to look, it's similar. You go into landscape view and you click view, show layouts, and you see this familiar layouts bar, and you see these familiar templates, only they're in portrait view. So you've got the chapter, we've got a number of them for sections, and they operate in much the same way. And if we create some space and show styles drawer, we have all of our same styles that we had in landscape view. So that much at least is the same. Now there's one more thing to keep in mind, which is very useful, especially considering all the frustrations I just mentioned. And that is, if you go to the inspector palette, and we go to I think it's the document inspector, yep, you can choose to disable portrait orientation altogether. And that way, when your readers rotate their iPads it just won't go in to portrait. It'll stay in landscape and just kind of be sideways. So if you want to make an end run around all of these frustrations and difficulties, just disable that. But be aware that you might alienate some of your readers because, reading in portrait, you see more of the screen, you see more text at once in the kind of vertical sense. So they might not be thrilled that you've disabled that for them. It just kind of depends what kind of book you're making as to whether that's a wise idea or not. But that is a possibility, at least, to keep in mind.